Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Joanna Nelson, and I am with the Economic Development Department for the state of New Mexico. And today, you have joined us for a webinar on the Small Business Recovery Loan Fund. And today's focus will be on eligibility and how to apply. We are very happy that you can join us. And I did want to cover a few things before we get started. We will be recording this presentation and it will be available online afterward. We will send the link to the recording out after the presentation. You should get that this afternoon. As well, you will get the presentation slide deck in your email. We want to encourage everyone to ask questions. You can do that in the questions box that you should see on the right side of your screen. It's a gray horizontal box. You tap that arrow and you should see a white blank box. Just type your questions in as they come to you, and we will do our best to answer those at the end of the session. We also got your questions if you submitted any when you registered, so we will be addressing those as well. I did want to make sure all the attendees are aware of the Economic Development Department's COVID-19 response in regard to how we're getting information and resources out to New Mexicans. On our website, you can find a page that is specific for COVID-19 response, which you can see on that top link. We also, every week, are putting out a resource wrap-up, which includes opportunities around grants, loans. We're highlighting news articles. We are finding relevant webinars that are occurring, and most of them are focused on COVID-19 relief and recovery for businesses as well as nonprofits and communities. So if you aren't getting those currently, take a few seconds to sign up at this link. You can also find that link at the bottom of our website, and you will start getting those updates. Also on our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, we are also making sure that news gets out in relation to different opportunities for businesses and communities. Here is our website. You also can find your regional rep for the department. We have 6 of them in the state. You can do that using this link in our website. On our YouTube channel, you can find all previous webinars that address financing programs and opportunities. Our Opportunity Zones website can be found at nmopportunity.com. And here I have listed Mark Roper, the division director's contact, as well as mine. So please reach out to us, excuse me, if we can be of any assistance. So I'm very excited to get the webinar started. I wanted to introduce Daniel Schlegel first, and he is with the governor's office, and he is the entrepreneur and small business advisor for the governor's office. So Dan?
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you all for joining today. Again, my name is Dan Schlegel. I'm the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Advisor in the Governor's Office. Thank you again for joining, and looking forward to kicking off this new loan program. As small business owners, you all have suffered the brunt of the economic fallout from COVID-19. I know it's been devastating for you and your employees, customers, and your communities that rely on your services. And your resilience during nearly 5 months of this unprecedented pandemic has been truly tested and proven. And now we all have to learn to live and survive and thrive in a COVID positive world. As the federal Paycheck Protection Program is coming to an abrupt end soon, I hope this new Small Business Recovery Fund will serve as a lifeline for your businesses. The legislature set aside $400 million for these borrower-friendly, very low-interest loans to cover day-to-day expenses and new expenses you might be encountering, like the purchase of PPE, the protective gear for your employees, or hand sanitizer for your customers, or even to redesign your business to have a new business model or a new physical space. to be safer for your customers and employees. I'd like to thank the New Mexico Finance Authority, represented today by Marquita Russell and Adam Johnson, who worked very quickly to get this loan program up and running, and who will be providing us all with an in-depth view of the program and how to apply for it. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Joanna. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. And now I would like to introduce Marquita Russell, who is the CEO of the New Mexico Finance Authority. Marquita?
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Joanna. We are very excited to be here today to share with you the program that will roll out next week. As Dan mentioned, the Small Business Recovery Act of 2020 was signed into law by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham on July 7th. A mere 23 days ago, seems like a lifetime ago. The $400 million program will provide low interest rate loans to businesses that have experienced financial hardship. They are 3-year loans and can be used, as Dan mentioned, for a variety of business expenses. Importantly, though, they do not require personal guarantees or collateral and have no payments for the first year. The specific terms of the loan, and we'll get into some of this in greater detail a little further on in the presentation, the loan amount is 2 times the monthly average expenses, not to exceed $75,000. There's a technical calculation that we have to go through to determine your monthly average expenses, and the application process will guide you through that. The interest rate is 1/2 of Wall Street Journal Prime. Wall Street Journal Prime today is at 3.25%. So the interest rate on the loan is currently at 1.625%. And that interest rate will be fixed at the time that the loan is closed and will stay the relevant interest rate for the entire loan. So it does not float or move during the length of the loan. As I just mentioned, there is no collateral and personal guarantees are not required. The initial term of the loan is 3 years. These are interest only, paid annually. So you'll have your first interest due 1 year after the loan closes. You'll pay another interest payments a year later. And then at the end of the 3-year period, the principal is due. At the business's request, the Finance Authority can extend the loan for an additional 3 years, and that would then have monthly principal and interest repayments. And it's important to note that this is a loan program, though with very beneficial and flexible terms, but it is not a grant program. There is an expectation that the loan will be repaid. So some of the eligibility requirements contained in the Small Business Recovery Act is that the New Mexico business needs to have demonstrated that it was closed or reduced operations due to the public health order, had annual gross revenues of less than $5 million as determined by the 2019 federal income tax filing, and experienced a 30% decline in the monthly gross receipts, or if you're a nonprofit, the monthly revenues in April and May of 2020 as compared to those same months in 2019. So a business means any for-profit, sole proprietor, partnership, corporation, limited liability company, or for nonprofit, specifically a 501c3, which is a charitable organization, or a 501c6, which is an association. The other thing that the statute provides is that the assets and the control of the business be with New Mexico residents. So if you're a sole proprietor, that means we have to see 100% of the assets of the business are owned or leased by a New Mexico resident. If you're another kind of business legal entity like a corporation or a partnership, we need to see that at least 80% of the total voting power and 80% of the total value is owned by one or more New Mexico residents. And there's a specific definition and statute which we can't find another peer to anywhere else in the state statutes. So we are requiring that this that New Mexico residency be evidenced by personal income tax filings. So if you are an equity owner, so this wouldn't relate to whether or not you're on a nonprofit, if you're on a nonprofit board, that won't relate to you. But if you are an equity owner in a business, a for-profit business, then we will need to see the personal tax returns for those entities to ensure that in fact they are New Mexico residents. And if you have not filed your 2019 personal income tax, then you can, for this purpose only, you can file, you can submit your 2018 with evidence that you've had an extension filed at the federal level. The Small Business Recovery Act did partner the Finance Authority with two different kinds of entities. We normally get partnered directly with economic development providers. In this instance, we are being partnered with both lenders and technical assistance providers across the state in helping to achieve the goals of the program. It allows us specifically to work with banks, credit unions, and community development financial institutions to act as loan servicers who will help in assembling the loan documents for the Finance Authority's review. And it also recognizes that technical assistance providers play a really important role in small businesses and in their success, and creates what is called a service provider. And that service provider is able to receive a fee from the fund, not from the borrower, but from the fund to provide ongoing technical assistance to very small businesses. And those are the businesses with annual revenues of less than $500,000. Jumping into the application process, which is the reason I think you all are here. The application will be available on August 5th, that's next Wednesday. You'll access the application from our new website, which is www.nmfinance.com. And we'll keep that open until December 31st or until the funds are gone, whichever comes first. But the process that we're going to use is that you will use an online application that has some built-in logic to it, and it will then direct you to the next set of relevant questions based on the answer you just provided, so that you're not being asked questions that aren't relevant to your organization. Once you complete the application and upload the required documents, and we'll go through that in a minute, the application will then go to a loan servicer. Again, that's those participating banks and credit unions, as well as the alternative lenders. They will then ensure that the application was filled out correctly, that you attach the correct forms, that you put into the application form itself the correct line items from the tax documents, as the statute provides. They'll then send the application to us once it's complete, and then we'll process and make the loan determination, send you the loan documents, and fund the loan. So everything happens at the Finance Authority level after the review is completed by the banks. The applications will be processed on a first-come, first-served basis. So it's important to have the correct documentation at hand and to get that into the system as quickly as possible. The other thing that I would mention is that the system does not allow applicants to save their work. So once you create the application and get started, you need to complete it in that sitting, and it shouldn't time out for very long. I mean, you'll have some time in which to get it completed, but if you don't have all the documents, don't get started on your application. It's very important that you make certain that you're able to do it all in one sitting, because we don't want to frustrate you later on by having you recreate the application you just started. So the documents you will need are your 2019 business federal tax returns. For a nonprofit, that will be your Form 990. Copies of the CRS forms, those are the combined reporting system forms that you submit either monthly or quarterly to the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department, and that shows the amount of gross receipts that you earned. We need them for the months that cover April and May of both 2019 and 2020. And that's what's going to help us determine for a for-profit business whether you meet that required 30% decline in each of those months. For nonprofits, because you don't file those kinds of tax forms with the state, we'll be asking you to submit the monthly income statement or for profit and loss statement for the fiscal years that include April and May of 2019 and 2020. Again, so that we can have a month-over-month comparison, similar to what we do for for-profit businesses. We are required to take into consideration any CARES Act loan dollars you may have received. So we are going to ask for the electronic versions of your CARE Act loan. If you've got a CARES Act grant, we don't need to see that. It's just any CARE Act loan dollars that you received. You are not, if you have a CARES Act loan, either a PPP loan or an EIDL loan, that doesn't disqualify you for a loan from the Small Business Recovery Loan Fund. It just is something we need to take into consideration. The personal income tax returns, as we just discussed, to demonstrate that the equity owners are New Mexico residents. And then we're going to ask for an authorization form allowing NMFA to pull a business credit report. And we are going to be doing that for purposes of determining creditworthiness, which is a statutory requirement. For purposes of our program, we are going to be looking at a credit report for commercial entities. So if you are a sole proprietor, you'll still be getting a commercial credit report pulled on you. All other businesses, it's the only other kind of credit report we can pull. And we're going to be looking at 2019 as the base year for the credit behavior to determine this credit worthiness. And we'll look at any payment history you have with telecommunications, utilities, and your rent or mortgage payment. So those three classes of creditors are what's going to help us determine your pattern of credit behavior. And so if you have charge-offs or collections with any of those three creditor types, again, telecommunications, utilities, and rent payments, if you had a charge-off or collection, that will disqualify you from the program. And that's what that form will be used for. And the other thing that we're going to need at the time of the application is for you to provide us with your checking account. We're going to need to verify that it's in fact a valid checking account, that there wasn't an error in entry for the account information or the routing information. We also want to make sure that it's not a fraudulent account, that somebody hasn't taken account information from another borrower and submitted it. So this is important to us for not only determining accuracies for when we fund the loan, but for fraud mitigation, because of course we are using state dollars, we're investing state dollars, we need to be good stewards of those funds. The checking account will need to be held in the name of the applicant at a federally insured financial institution. So the money, if you are a corporation, the money has to go into a checking account in the name of the corporation. So the only time it can go into the like a equity owner's account is if it's a sole proprietor. We'll be using a secure financial application system called Plaid that's going to help us verify that the account is valid and held in the name of the applicant. This is a fairly well-known application system that sits behind other technologies. You can see it, Venmo, for instance, uses it for a bank-to-bank secure connection so that they can make certain that they have the right account information. We will not, however, be asking you that information unless you meet all the other qualifications. So if you have revenues in excess of $5 million, or maybe you didn't have an initial decline of 30% for the month of March, you won't be asked then for your personal bank account information because you don't qualify for the program. So you will only get asked that question if in fact you've met all the other qualifications at face value. And all of this information, not only the checking account, but the application itself, is held on a secure site. and all of the documents that we receive with that are secure and protected. So they're not only protected from inspection of public records, but they are securely held. So you are providing us with a great deal of confidential information, and we want you to know that we understand that and it's being adequately protected with your security in mind. At the time that a loan is made, only the borrower's name will be disclosed. So we won't be disclosing the business name, we won't be disclosing the amount of the loan, the location. We'll only be disclosing, pursuant to statute, the borrower's name. And again, it's a public loan program, so for purposes of disclosure, that's an important facet. But the rest of the Act protects the rest of the information that's held by the borrower. Just some small detail, the fine print, if you will. We talked about average monthly expenses. There are two ways in which we look at that. The first is the average adjusted monthly business expense, which is taken from your tax returns, and there's a couple of lines that get determined in that from your actual tax form, less any deductions for and those are the deductions for business depreciation, less any CARES Act funding, and then we divide it by 12. So Adam will go through this in a little bit. He's going to take you actually through the application, but we wanted to give you a sense as to why we need the tax forms for purposes of determining not only the qualification, but the amount of the loan that you'll qualify for, and why we needed the rest of that information that we just went through. And then ultimately, the loan proceeds may be used for expenses, as Daniel mentioned early on. If you need additional money to reconfigure your business space or your business activities to adjust for COVID, for marketing, 80% of the funds must be used for any ordinary business expense. So you may only pay equity owners with no more than 20% of the loan proceeds. So if you're a sole proprietor and your primary expense is salaries for equity owners, then you won't qualify for the program. You might technically meet the qualifications, but because the loan proceeds are intended to be spent on salaries for equity owners, that will be a disqualifying event. And I think at this point, the application itself should take no more than 30 minutes if you have all of the documentation in front of you. It will then go through that review process, and the time it takes to review it will be largely dependent on how legible the document is that you supplied, whether you picked up the right line items, that sort of thing. But the reviewer, the whole system is intended to take 30 minutes or so on the applicant side, about an hour's time from the lender side, and then it will come to the finance authority, and we should be able to turn that application around within a day. We will then generate documents from the application system, and it will be sent to you directly through that, and you'll do a version of DocuSign. It'll come back to us, and then we will fund the loan approximately within 3 days of closing, depending on the day that we end up closing the loan. And that money will go right into the bank account that you provided the information on at application. So once you've submitted the application, the only other thing that we will ask you for during the loan process is for you to sign a loan document, the loan agreement itself. Otherwise, you've provided everything we need up front, and you should be able to just wait for your positive answer at that point. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Adam Johnson, who is the Finance Authority's Chief of Program Operations, and he has designed the application system he's going to walk you through. Adam?
Hi, great. Good morning. Thank you, Marquita. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And we're happy to share this demonstration with you and get you prepared to engage in this process next Wednesday. What you're looking at here is a copy of the Finance Authority's Small Business Recovery Loan Fund application. What we have designed here is an application, as Marquita mentioned, that is intended to be incredibly user-friendly and walk you very specifically through the steps that are required to receive this funding under the statute and not send you down a direction of questions that do not apply to you based upon the type of organization, being nonprofit or for-profit, and then the different types under the business entity legal type. And so we start right in the beginning of the application by providing to you which documents are needed before you proceed. And then the application has various built-in logic as you go through it. So in this application example, the applicant is ready to proceed. The question is whether or not you have 30 to 60 minutes to complete. As Marquita mentioned, it cannot be saved. As long as you're active, I do not anticipate that it will time out on you. If you were to get pulled away from it, I would think it may time out after a couple of hours. But if you're not ready to proceed, then the application actually does not allow you to proceed. And so this applicant, this is Megan Stiles. She owns Stiles Salon. She's a for-profit sole proprietor. It asks her the question about whether or not she owns 100% of the assets. And again, if she doesn't, then the application does not proceed. Basic information about the applicant is asked. To get the profile of the applicant, and then it proceeds down to the first qualification, which is the $5 million or less in total revenue as reported on the 2019 tax return. And so what we've done here is we've also made sure to provide the exact page and the line of that tax document that would need to be reviewed to get that accurately put into the application. And so in this instance, we'll just say that she has a $500,000 revenue. As Marquita mentioned, the statute does provide for the ability to have a technical service provider assist you in various aspects of your business. That's not to be confused with that they are assisting you with filling out the application or filling out the application for you. And in this case, should there be one, then you'll have an opportunity to provide who that individual or organization, nonprofit, or governmental entity is, such as SCORE, that may be providing this type of service. If not, no, and proceed. This is the revenue and decline calculation that's required per the statute with the 30% decline. And so it also will go ahead and do the math for you, provided you enter accurately the information from the CRS reports or from the financial reports for a nonprofit for the time periods, and calculates the percent decline to show that you can go ahead and proceed. As Marquita mentioned, I did want to demonstrate for folks that it was specifically in mind that we did not want folks to submit their personal information to the finance authority if they did not meet the qualifications in statute. And so the application does not proceed or have any questions beyond your name and address until after the entity is qualified for the loan. This section is the section for calculating the average adjusted monthly expenses. As Marquita mentioned, this comes directly from the tax returns from 2019. In this case, because she's a sole proprietor, it's page 1, lines 28 and 30 of the 1040 Schedule C. And we'll just say she has a total expense amount of $250,000. She's got $10,000 a year in depreciation due to her tenant improvements. Let's say she's also received a $20,000 CARES Act loan. That total number of $220,000 is then divided by 12 and multiplied by 200% or 2 to determine the loan calculation. In the event that we have a larger business that applies for this, the application will go ahead and take the lesser of the amount of $75,000 or this calculated here. So if it's above, then the $75,000 amount will populate rather than the higher number that would populate with a larger business. I saw some questions coming through about the partnership with a loan servicer. One of the questions was whether or not you can proceed if your bank or credit union is not on the list, and the answer is yes. And in fact, you'll have the ability to say, I don't have one, and the finance authority will go ahead and make that selection when it comes in through the process of the workflow. The further down in the application, as Marquita mentioned, we will be integrating the self-verification secure financial system with Plaid directly into the application. And so we'll actually, this will just be a question, but we will not be requesting you to type any bank information into the form. It will be coming securely from Plaid directly into the form. And that process I can't demonstrate today, but you'll see that as soon as the application goes live on Wednesday. Next, the anticipated use of funds. This is really so that we can get an understanding and also make sure that folks are aware of the limit on the equity owner's salaries cannot be greater than 20%. But this is not to be confused with that. These are requirements that if you say 30% for employees and 30% for rent and 20% for marketing, we're not holding you to that. The only thing that is a requirement is not 20% or not greater than 20% for the equity owners of the business. And the rest of this portion of the application is helps us understand for reporting purposes how the loan proceeds will be spent, as well as getting some information about the business, the number of employees. The statute requires the finance authority to report to the legislature both the information that we received in the application process and then an ongoing reporting regarding jobs for the businesses that do participate. And so we start here with this form of communication, and then we'll be using other outreach in order to contact the businesses that do receive funding and get updates as time progresses and we make our way through this unprecedented time. The last reporting, or I'm sorry, not the last, but one of the reporting requests is the code that's reported all to both taxation and revenue and also on your federal tax return. Most folks can self-select what industry that they're in pretty easily, but there's also, there'll be information about where you can find that on various tax documents. And then lastly, we have, for reporting purposes, this selection here for diverse business class. You can click as many as that apply, and then take yourself down here to the bottom, and the final request is just an amount of outstanding loans. The required documents that were mentioned in the beginning have been put down here at the bottom for upload. They are incredibly specific so that you can easily put in the various files and not have to compile a very large packet. You can just do one by one and know exactly that you've checked off all the boxes as long as you've uploaded the correct document to this. And these are the files that the loan servicers will use to compare the application input directly to determine that in fact the applicant was eligible. And I did want to also reiterate the security behind this, that all of these files as they're transferring will be encrypted, and they won't go on the internet in an unencrypted fashion. They will be encrypted in their transit. Finally, there's the certification statements that that are essentially identical to the certification statement that's made upon loan closing, but this is in effect to let folks know really what they're agreeing to up front before they get those documents. And these are all yes, no questions, and after that you submit the form. And unless I missed anything, Marquita, that you need me to add, I would turn this back over probably for questions from the audience.
No, Adam, thank you for going through that. The only thing that I would mention is you'll see some of the documents here, signed authorization for ACH payment. So this is in beta mode, and that document's actually been incorporated into your loan agreement. So you don't actually need to sign that at the time of application. That will happen as part of your loan agreement. And because we do have Plaid integrated, we're not going to be asking for account statements from your bank. So we were initially going to do that, but the system that we integrated or are in the process of integrating from Plaid allows us to not require you to submit more paper to us. So this is a much more secure way for us to get the information and make certain that fraud doesn't occur. So that was the only other thing I wanted to mention, Adam.
Great, thank you for that.
Pretty straightforward.
Let me get the PowerPoint.
Yeah, so with that, Joanna, I think we are ready to answer questions.
Okay, thanks, Marquita. Thanks, Adam. We are getting some really great questions. Lots of questions are coming in. So want to remind folks that now is the chance. You have the opportunity to ask the expert. So type in your questions on the right side of your screen. And a lot of the questions are similar. So I'm going to do my best to kind of summarize several of them in some standalone questions. So many people have asked, what happens if they are filing an extension on their 2019 taxes? What do they do?
So if you are filing an extension on your business taxes, then we unfortunately aren't going to be able to assist you until you complete that filing. So we need to see, because of the very specific description in statute, we need to actually see the tax form that you have filed. So that is a necessary part of the application process.
Okay. Let's move on. And you all did a really great job at answering a lot of these. We have a question that states, how can I find a service provider, and is there any help in Spanish?
So the application will be available in both English and Spanish. And there are frequently asked questions on our website that are posted in both English and Spanish. So we do have some written guidelines on how to apply for this program available in Spanish. Technical assistance providers, I know that a lot of small business development centers are able to provide assistance to you. SCORE is another one that was mentioned. Your community college is frequently a really good place to find a technical assistance provider. And then lastly, many communities offer support through nonprofits that are like community development corporations or economic development corporations, community development financial institutions. I think, Joanna, you may have some of that information on one of your websites as well.
We do, and that's a good idea. I'll send that out when we send the email out to all the registrants. I'll put a link to the list of all the service providers in the state in regard to SBDCs and SCORE and West. Okay, so let's see. Just going through these.
I could jump in on
the
general.
Go ahead.
It's okay that I'm seeing a number of questions just about the specific forms, and the statute provides the language to the finance authority for the exact forms that are needed, and so there's not the ability to use different ways of looking at it. So when it's asking for the CRS, gross receipts reported on the CRS, that's what we need in order to verify those types of numbers. But I did want to mention the caveat there, because it is different for not-for-profits, which don't report that. And so that process, which is very clearly articulated in the application, but also in the frequently asked questions and on our website, is that the financial statements for the months of May and April will be tied to their Form 990s. And so I saw a question about, what if your 990 your fiscal year ends in a different period? The way you have to think about it is just ensure that the financial statements you're providing to us, that April and May time period is encompassed in one or even two of your Form 990s. So as long as you provide the supporting information to those months, then you won't have any problem making it through the process. And that not-for-profits will also be required to submit a certifying letter from the executive director, an independent accountant, or a member of their board certifying that the financial statements provided are true and correct.
So Adam, just to make certain, in those instances, nonprofits whose fiscal year ends on April 30th will have to submit two 990s, is what I'm hearing you say?
That's correct.
And then otherwise it's one 990 and then the current financial information that's been certified.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay, thanks for that. We have several questions that are asking about what happens if the business was started in May of 2019 or at some point after, during 2019. Are they still eligible?
That's a very good question, and it's one we get a lot. Unfortunately, no, because we have to verify that you had a decline from April and May. You needed to have been in business by April of 2019. So if you started in May or beyond, that will disqualify you. We don't have
Okay.
any room in statute for that, to make any adjustments to that.
Okay, thanks. There's a question about the telecommunication collection accounts. Will businesses have an opportunity to respond to any issues on their credit reports?
So yes, so the commercial credit report that we will be pulling provides for an opportunity to respond. So there is an opportunity for that. Businesses take a little longer than personal credit reports, and we're not pulling personal credit reports, just the business ones. So it doesn't have the same timelines, but there is a process. We'll be using the Experian credit reporting agency, and there's a process set up in that to discuss any of those credit issues.
We have a question about what happens if the business is waiting on a decision from a CARES loan program. What information should be provided?
Yeah, until you have a loan document, you're not required to submit a loan document. So, if you've applied and don't have any word back at the time of application, then you will submit the application with the information you have at hand, which is a none at that point.
Okay, and a similar question about what type of documents do you need to provide if you do have a CARES Act loan, such as an EIDL or PPP, or is just the amount needed?
We'll want to see the loan agreement. So if the loan agreement will need to be provided, or the note, depending on which loan you have. Some of them combine them.
Okay, another question states, does the applicant have to own 100% of the business?
So in that regard, if there's more than one owner, at least 80% of the ownership in terms of voting power and equity have to be with New Mexico residents. It can be more than one New Mexico resident, but at least 80% of the voting power and equity has to reside with New Mexico residents.
Okay. Where can we find the statute on the act?
I'm very bad at chapter law, but it was Senate Bill 3 from the 2020 first special session, and we'll put up a link on our website so that people have an opportunity. The act itself is very big. It actually does three things. This is one of the three things that it does. The second is a loan program for municipalities and counties, providing them with some revenue replacement loans. That program is not yet operational. And then there's some unemployment tax, insurance tax calculation changes, temporary provisions put in place to protect small business owners who had to lay off people as a result of COVID. That's in the third part of the statute. So it's a very big statute. This is only one portion of it.
Thank you. Let's see. Just had one. There's many coming in. Oh, can you use funds to refinance private loans you have taken out for the business?
The loans you took out of the business to sustain operations during the COVID period. So I think the question I'm trying to get to is whether the monies were used for ordinary expenses from the point at which COVID was in place, so March 23rd on, then I think the answer is yes. If it was prior to that, then I think the answer is no, because it's intended to help businesses impacted by COVID with their operations. So many people might have had to float a loan in order to keep business going outside of the CARES Act. That I believe is eligible for that reimbursement. But if it was like a startup loan from 2 years ago, then that would not fit the definition.
Okay, thank you. Numerous questions are coming in about how to calculate the decline in revenue for the 2019 period in April and May. Some are saying that there might have been discrepancies, or maybe they were very low in the first month and not as low in the second month. And on average, for example, this company is saying they were down 46% for 2 months. So is there any additional clarification that you all can offer in helping people understand if there's how to calculate that, or if there's any additional information to add?
Sure. In many ways, the statute was helpful because it gave very clear direction from lawmakers about how to deliver the funds. Unfortunately, it's also fairly intractable in terms of we don't have a lot of wiggle room in some areas. So in this particular area, there has to be a demonstration of a 30% decline in the months of April and May. So it's not the 2-year period, the 2-month period we're looking at, but that you met the test in each of those months. And so if you had a 32% decline in April and a 28% decline in May, unfortunately that 28% decline would make you ineligible to proceed.
Thank you. What is the nonprofit? Is there a nonprofit equivalent for the business credit report?
So in that instance, you don't report your monthly revenues the same way to taxation and revenue. And that's why we're asking for your income statement or your profit and loss statement to be reported in months. So instead of a fiscal year report, we want the fiscal year broken up month over month, because we're going to be pulling out of that financial statement the information to populate the decline calculation. So it is simply the financial statements, and as Adam mentioned, they will have to have a letter certifying them as true and accurate. But those are the reports that we'll be relying on.
Okay, thank you. Can businesses still qualify if they are behind in their state taxes?
So again, here, the statute is very clear. If you were current prior to March 23rd, but you're no longer current, then you're fine. Yes, you would still qualify. If you were behind on March 23rd, then no, you would not qualify. So the determinant here is whether or not you were current on all your tax obligations prior to the public health order being issued. So March 23rd is that bright line for us to determine qualifications if you were behind.
Okay, thank you. Here's a question about being registered with an ITIN. Are companies eligible to qualify for the program if they have an ITIN?
Adam, you've been dealing with the tax forms. I'm going to throw this one over to you. Do you have?
I don't have an answer to that question, but I'll be happy to find out and make sure that gets put into the frequently asked questions.
Okay, thanks. And Adam, feel free to jump in. I know you can see the questions, just going through some of these, but many of them have been answered. And several people are asking if the presentation will be sent out, and just want to restate that we will send the presentation and the recording out.
There's a few questions about when it will be available. It will be available on our website on next Wednesday. And we also will include a list of at that point, the loan servicers that have chosen to participate in the program. And so that will also be available. That's another question that I'm seeing coming through. A question about the personal income tax for equity owners. The years needed, it would be 2019. Unless that has not been filed, we can accept a 2018 with an extension, but this is specific to the equity owner's evidence of residency. Not to be confused with the 2019 tax return that's required to evidence the total revenue amount.
Here's an interesting question that is stating that the business is entering their third year of business, but has not yet had a profit. Are they still able to qualify?
Yes, none of the qualifications are based upon the profit calculation.
And several questions are around being a sole proprietor or only having the owner is the only employee. Can you repeat if there's any differences in what those businesses need to supply for the application?
Sure. There's the only difference is the exact forms that they would be using to supply the information. But and also, as Marquita mentioned, that if the majority if greater than 20% of the general expenses, the ordinary expenses, go to the owner, in this case, the total amount of proceeds available for the owner to pay themselves cannot exceed 20%. But the rest of the revenue requirements, the $5 million or less remains the same. The 30% decline in April and May remains the same. And then the calculation for the loan amount still remains the same. It just comes from a different tax document.
Here's a question asking about what is required of the business after they get the loan. Is there a reporting requirement?
So yes, in addition to being required to make your annual interest payment on the first anniversary and second anniversary, and your full payment on the third anniversary of the loan, we're going to be asking for annual job information. So one of the reasons we asked the kinds of questions we did at the beginning in the application about the number of jobs is so that we have some comparison for additional job information as the years go on and hopefully everything has stabilized. But we are required to report back some demographic information to the policyholders, to the lawmakers that passed this law. And very specifically, they want to know about jobs. So we'll be asking for follow-up reports at least annually.
Okay, thank you. A few questions are about owners that have purchased a business and they're stating that there is revenue information or tax information for 2019. However, it might not necessarily be the applicant that was filing the taxes as the business shifted ownership. So would they be able to apply and use that 2019 information?
That is a very good and technical question, and I will have to have another look at the statute because that was not something that we really focused on in developing it, but the statute's very clear. We'll have to include that in our FAQs as well. I apologize, I don't have that answer.
No problem, thank you. And then another question around the application. If there is additional information or needed clarification, will folks have the opportunity to provide or fix their application? Will they be able to go back and fix it?
Yes.
Or do they only get one attempt to apply?
No, that's a great question. We've built into the process the ability for any reviewer along the step of the way to be able to communicate back with the applicant in a secure manner. The way that it will work is you'll receive an email that's not secure coming from the reviewer, but they will be providing a link to a secure form where you can resolve any issues that weren't clear in the first upload. And then it'll come back to us and then it's secure in an encrypted way.
Here's a technical question about where the owners reside. This is saying that the owners of the business live outside of the state, but the business is located in the state. Will that qualify?
So I think the short answer is no. The owners need to be living, they need to be physically present in the state for 185 days or more during the taxable year. So if they live outside the state, then that would not qualify.
Okay, and I'm getting down to the end of the questions list. So Adam, if you see any that you all would like to address, jump in.
Sure, thank you.
Let's see. Okay. There were a few questions about what time the application will be available next week.
Well, I'm not sure that we've contemplated the exact time that it will go live. I would assume by the start of a normal business day.
Yes, we will be sending out a link to the application to individuals that have asked us to do so. So if you email recovery@nmfa.net, you'll be given the information as it is available, including that the application is open and a link to the page. So I would recommend highly that if people would like some additional follow-up information or to be kept in the loop, that recovery, RECOVERY @nmfa.net would be the place to go. And if you have questions during the application process, you may also email that place. Because we are working remotely as an organization, it's hard to necessarily understand who's available to talk on the phone. So we have several different people tending to that email, making certain that the questions are being timely responded to. And so that is a really good way to get our attention quickly.
Okay, great. I think that's a good ending statement, Marquita. Unless, Adam, you see any other questions that were not addressed as I'm going through these.
I think we addressed, there's one final one here about sending the link to everybody in this workshop, and I think the answer to that is also yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I suppose we will wrap up. So I do want to thank Marquita and Adam for all the fantastic information. This is the third part of this webinar series discussing this program, and each one has been exceptional and really informative. So we will send out the link to the presentation. We will send out the slides as well as the contact information for the program. So if you did not get your question answered, that will be the place to pose it to. So thank you all for tuning in, and thanks again, Marquita and Adam, on all your phenomenal work on this.
Thank you, Joanna. We really appreciate your help and people's time today.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Okay, bye.